That's what I'm talking about. All right, folks, welcome to 202 training, conversing/talking with misinformed or disinformed voters. We have our resident expert and specialist here in the room. Ahmed, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself in just a second, but I just wanted it to open the training here because we got a lot of folks on here. Some of y'all this might be your first brush with Common Power, like this is your first event with us. Welcome. Some of y'all are veterans here, so welcome back, right? But just a little bit of context, the 202 training series is a little bit different than our other general volunteer training. If you look on our training page, commonpower.org/training, and I'll put the link in there in just a second, you will see a progression of volunteer training all the way from 101 to this 202. So if you are starting out on 202, just know that you just entered the specialized deep pool, all right? This is not your general volunteer training. However, we have all of our volunteer training recorded on our website on that same page. So if you missed this one, or if you didn't get a chance to catch any other ones, right? Go ahead and just look on our website and do whatever you need to do with those, okay? So once again, I'll put that all in the chat for you and it'll be included in a follow-up email. But just so you know, we are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day. All of our resources, all of our volunteers and our staff are pointed towards swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, you name it, we're there. That means that tonight is the last live session of volunteer training. If you look on our volunteer calendar, there is no more live training after this. So you will have to look at our recordings, right? And I'll put that. Thank you so much, Whitney. And Whitney's one of our volunteer trainers. Give her some love. So go ahead and just like take a look at that for the recordings. Okay. So if you're here at 202, we are preparing you all to talk to some of the most difficult conversations that one can have with a stranger in America when it comes to politics. We are dealing with, we are trying to reach across political differences, sometimes racial differences, to try to make a connection with voters and move them to the polls. Our mission is to win elections, and Common Power is willing to go anywhere, talk to anybody to achieve that goal, directed and guided by our partner organizations on the ground. And in this election cycle, our partner organization, usually the Democratic parties or like directly campaigns in some of these states, have decided that the way to win is to persuade people who may not be registered as Democrats, but will vote Democrat this year, and turn them out and get us over the edge to the margin of victory. So because we are not speaking to people who will vote our way at face value, we got to learn a little bit of new set of skills to talk to them and bridge those gaps. That's what the 202 trainings are for. And so you can take a look at, again, all the recordings of the other sessions in 202. This one in particular is going to be about voters that we find at doors that have various degrees of misinformation or disinformation embedded in them. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ahmed, our wonderful speaker and facilitator for this session here. And you can take it away, introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So thank you all for being here. First of all, we got almost 100 people here. So this is really cool.
Wait, 1 second.
Appreciate you all spending this time there. And I'll get to my bio, but just to give you.
Wait, 1 second, Ahmed.
What's up? Is my audio
is anybody
breaking up?
hearing the lagging as well? Not if you are. Okay. Yeah, I think it's your connection.
Shouldn't be the case. Give me half a second.
All good.
I should be on a really fast connection. Let me see what's going on there.
All good, man. Sometimes this happens. All right, everybody, hum the tune of Jeopardy in your head for just 30 seconds. Okay? No slides have been shared yet. All right, well, in the meantime, after we have the Pennsylvania orientation meeting link right here. If anybody else is on this call, who needs to be at the Pennsylvania orientation meeting, please click on this link.
All right, so I switched to a Bluetooth or switched to a hotspot. Is this better?
There you go.
This is
Yeah,
better.
we got you, man. We got you here.
Okay, you got me here now. You can see me. You can. Okay, all right. So I'm
All
on a
right.
hotspot connection now, and if it lags again, stop me, and I'll switch to the Wi-Fi. It should be working. But okay, great. So thank you all for being here. There are 94 of you here. This is awesome. I appreciate you. And before I get into my bio, what I'm going to do is just talk through a little about what we're going to cover. We're going to basically, I'm going to give you some context on the disinformation age first, and we're going to go through a little bit of that and some exercises on how we manage our own media literacy. And then at the end, we're going to go through some scenarios and talk through exactly how we handle disinformation with voters and in our day-to-day lives. Does that sound good? All right, no lag this time. Let's go. All right, let me share the screen and we're getting into it. All right. Okay, so welcome to Dialogue in the Disinformation Age. You can see, okay, I see Ben Nadi. You can see my screen. Our connection is up to par. Basically, right now I write a newsletter on Substack. I am also a Pennsylvania team lead with Common Power. I've basically, for the last decade, been analyzing disinformation and covering politics, essentially. I did it in my company, and then I basically write columns at The Independent, and I have a newsletter on Substack, which is where I put most of my journalism now. And when I worked at Rant, when we were running our media company, we partnered with an organization in the UK that focused on de-radicalization. So I got to see these methods of how do you not only track this disinformation that I saw through the machinery of covering the Trump administration, but how do you then bring people back from the brink? And basically getting those tactics and synthesizing them, and through different studies and various research, I basically created a media literacy toolkit here with Common Power. I give media literacy lectures to college students and K through 12. And believe it or not, these fifth graders, I did a fifth grader a couple weeks ago, and they are fantastic. And they actually really, one of them was explaining to me how ChatGPT's language models work. So we're in good hands. And today we're going to go through some of that to basically reconcile how we got here with where we're going and how we deal with this totally unprecedented disinformation age we find ourselves in. All right, so I'm going to get into it here a little bit. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to hypnotize all of you, right? That's a little bit of sarcasm, light joke. I'm going to ask you, how many triangles do you see? How many triangles do you see? And we'll throw it in the chat if you can. Throw it in the chat. How many triangles do you see? 8, 6. We've got a lot. We've got a lot of 2s, 8s, a couple 5s in here. Okay. 9 or more. A lot. Okay, we've got a lot of guesses here. Okay, great. Well, a couple more. I'm gonna get a couple more in here, and then we're gonna see 11. Okay. All right. Well, the real answer is, all right. There we go. Whitney and Farhan right here at the end. The real answer is 0. There are no triangles, right? Because triangles have 3 connecting sides. And here, none of these sides are connecting. But based off our own preconceived notions, our own past experience, we try to complete the picture. We try to complete these triangles without having all the available facts, without having all the information we need, without that third connecting side. And people prey on this. This is an almost instinctual human bias that we have to detect threats. It's pattern recognition, right? And this is the fundamental thing that disinformation peddlers take advantage of. And it's confirmation bias, right? And we don't need to break down. I don't need to get anyone from the audience. I think you all know what this is, right? It's what we just covered. There's this tendency for us to consume information that aligns with our core beliefs that we have, that all of us have on either side of the political spectrum, to be honest. And sometimes we fall for disinformation, and we're going to run some exercises here in a little bit to see how up to par our own ability to check our own biases are. But yeah, I mean, this is really where we're at, is this exploitation of confirmation bias that we all have here. And of course, the different ways these biases are preyed upon, sometimes unintentionally, right? Misinformation, which is the unintentional spread, right? Like, I was tricked by the whole idea that Beyonce was going to be performing at the DNC. I'm sure all of us were. It was just innocent misinformation. It was not intentional. We did not think that that was going to happen. We did not think we were going to get the rug pulled from under us. But now we're going to have her in Houston, so it's okay. But that was just, some innocent mistake and misinformation. Disinformation is the intentional spread, the manufacturing of lies for the purpose to mislead. And that's where we have here. Now, how we got here is interesting. We had the big three, ABC, NBC, CBS. We had a commonly agreed upon set of facts. We had evening news at the national level before the different ecosystems of information were more local based, right? Based on your geography as opposed to your own individual algorithm, right? But nationally, we consumed the same information. And then the fairness doctrine ended under the Reagan administration. And from there, we saw a proliferation of partisan views. And of course, under the fairness doctrine, we had a system where these public networks, the ones who use public broadcast, were required to air opposing views. There was fairness. There was a fundamental agreement that we were going to present, all sides of the issue. Come the 90s, Rush Limbaugh surges, Fox News rises, and then we go into the .com era where blogs started to proliferate. The gatekeepers were gone. We used to have editors, someone at a local newspaper to get our voice heard, right? And then suddenly anyone can put up a blog, which was good for, some people like me who maybe didn't, think journalism is going to be their path, start blogging, and then you get traction. But on the flip side, you have people who can post really nefarious misinformation. And we see that in the 2010s in the social media era. And essentially, we've gone to this place where these algorithms prey upon our own biases, and each person exists in their own individualized algorithmic reality. And we're in this place where it's created this heightened, polarized environment. And, just looking at this like 40 years here, I mean, even the last 20 or 10, look how quickly this technology has arisen. Now we're in the AI era, right? And in the 1400s was when the printing press first became widely available. And that it took until 1844 for Samuel Morse to send the first telegraph. That's a 400-year gap, right? Between printing press and telegraph. And here we have like, look at this. Just, we're talking partisan radio. We're talking a couple of things here. Within 20 years, we have tweets and we have AI. And it's just been, Edward Wilson, the famous biologist, said that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Our brains are not equipped for this rapid expansion of technology. So that's where we're at currently. And essentially, we talked about the how we got here, but the why is important too. Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway always said, you show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. These are the incentives. And the outcome is what we see today with this eroded democracy we find ourselves in. Clickbait culture, social media feeds that basically, no matter the immoral pursuit of attention, it doesn't matter if it's good attention or bad attention, it just wants our eyeballs. And then we have this attention economy that is exploited by the likes of Donald Trump, JD Vance, Elon Musk now, and essentially everyone who exploits this new advanced economy that really sprung up within the last 2 decades. Facebook really pioneered this ad model in Google, and this is the result. And then we have the why it spreads, how it spread, obviously through media, social media, and now we have AI, right? And of course, I showed you the incentives, the outcome. It's an eroded democratic process. It's a place where we saw in 2016, January 6th, increased corruption, grifting. We see this all the time. And of course, societal polarization is one of the results. So that is the disinformation age we find ourselves in, just a really positive, happy situation we're in. I know I just threw a lot of like pretty negative outlook stuff there, but that's where we're at. Obviously, there's good people fighting it, and we can use technology for good as well as those using for bad. But this is really the disinfo industrial complex here in a nutshell. So any questions or thoughts so far? I want to throw in the chat. You can throw them in the chat as I'm going to. We're gonna have moments for that later, but I just wanted to get through some of the meatier stuff up front. But feel free to chime in the chat whenever you all would like to. Okay. Speaking of chiming in the chat, oh, thanks, Michael. Appreciate you. Anyone want to say what the biggest technological challenge we face in the disinformation age over the next decade? Anyone want to throw it in the chat? Think what is that technology that would cause this? Yeah, everyone. Yep. AI deepfakes, AI. Yep. Everyone is right. Everyone is right. It is a situation we find ourselves in where AI content can really expedite the proliferation of disinformation in ways that we were not prepared for. And it's really been something that we have had trouble reckoning with. And it's made disinfo more efficient. We have AI images, AI videos. We see it all the time, especially with the hurricane. We saw AI images, people acknowledging that they were AI images, but they felt true. It's just this really this unbelievable disinformation, this unreality that they've constructed that AI exacerbates here. So we're gonna get into some stuff here. All right, got this guy here. What are your thoughts on this? Does anyone have any initial thoughts you want to throw in the chat just about this image here? You know, this is Pope Francis. He is fresh. Yeah, exactly, Renee. He's looking damn good. He is about to hit the town with his boys. He's hidden. He's out here. He's doing his thing. Does anyone want to say whether they think it's real or fake in the chat? Some fakes. Yep. Okay, so the fingers give it away. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this one. Last year, this one went viral all over Twitter, and it's AI generated. And Adobe's CEO even released a statement and called it a paradigm shifting moment because everyone was getting tricked by it, right? Even Chrissy Teigen, we have celebrities who are getting tricked by it. And yeah, you're right. You're right. Let me see. Jessica. You're right, Jessica. The fingers give it away. If you look at the bottom left, his hand there, he's holding like something that's alleging to be a Starbucks cup. I don't know, but there's something going on there. And yeah, CP Future here, dripped out Pope. Yeah, this is an exercise we always do with the Action Academy students too. And I mean, we all wish this was real. That's the problem. We wish that the Pope had this sense of style. Fortunately, he doesn't. But this is like a funny use of AI. And then we have this, a really bad use of AI. And I use this example not only because it did get shared by Russian, you know, Russian state media. It moved markets. It for a very brief period of time, the stock markets were rattled by the fake image. Because now, especially with everyone having easy access to trade the markets, it caused a minor sell-off for like a couple minutes there, and that shows the real world impact of AI. So we all have to be really vigilant, and think like a juror. So that triangle exercise that I showed you at the beginning, and again, appreciate all of you for going through this context. After we go through this, I'm gonna talk through different ways to handle conversations with people at the door, etc. But I think it's just important for us all to get this context together. But that triangle exercise I showed you at the beginning is actually one that is given to New York jurors. And it is one that helps you check your biases. So that's why I've created this framework where you have to take yourself out of the information, which is hard, especially when sometimes you are the target of disinformation yourself. Might be maybe your identity or your ideology. And you know, you want to try not to jump to conclusions. You want to fact check claims. You want to recognize when algorithms may be manipulating you or sending you down the wrong path. And, that's really what we need to do here to guard ourselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a little activity. Okay. We're going to test everybody's ability so far of what they think they can, we're going to go through some things and we're going to see if they're real or fake. Okay. Can everyone throw in the chat, or anyone who wants to, just you don't have to put your hands up, because this is, it's Zoom. So just put 1 through 10 in the chat, your ability to tell fact from fiction. Do you think you got great media literacy? Okay. We've got some 7s, some 6s. Okay. Some confident, some like humble confidence. 10 is the strongest. Yes. Okay. Everyone's got some 8s, some 7s. Some people saying, on the lower end. Okay. Well, we're going to test this out. All right. We're going to go through some quotes, and then I'm going to show you some potential AI stuff. And we're going to see if it's real or fake. Okay. And I want you to throw it in the chat. I'll ask you, and you can just say real or fake in the chat when we go through it. Okay, this post here. Not is the information real, because we all know Jesus did not fight in the Continental Army. But is this post real? Did Marjorie Taylor Greene send this post? Okay, we got some reals, we got some no, we've got some real, fake, probably not. So a couple reals, mostly no's. So it's actually fake. So this went viral 2 years ago, on around July 4th, and it went viral among liberal Twitter. And the thing is, because of our own preconceived notions, because of our own biases, our own ideas about this person, who, even though she did just say the weather can be controlled, nothing goes beyond her. But it's like, because a person has a history, just because a person has a history of saying something, we have a tendency to believe, right? And we might not want to fact check our own selves or check our own biases. And this is just an example of when that went wrong on liberal Twitter's end. So that's really an example right there of when we need to check our biases. Okay. Also, there's this weird red line. I don't know if it's on your guys' screen there too, but okay. So this one, did Donald Trump ever say, "We fell in love"? Let me tell you, he wrote me beautiful. Yes, we all know this one. Yes, we know Donald. Yes, it's real. He did do this. Unbelievable. My Trump impression's a little rusty, so I'm not going to throw it out tonight. But yes, Donald did say this. This one. Did Joe Biden ever say Cornpop was a bad dude and he ran a bunch of bad boys? No. A lot of no, some reals, no. Hope not. Fake, no, yes. I'll let a couple more answers go in. Joe Biden did say this. He did say this. And the context is hilarious. He said it to a largely Black audience, which was one of my favorite parts of that story. And he basically was bragging about how when he was a lifeguard, he faced down some gangster named Cornpop and really showed him who's boss, and kicked him out the pool. And he said the story in 2019. It's one of my favorite Bidenisms. And yeah, it happened. But because we may not believe Biden has a tendency to say off the wall things like Trump, we might have a tendency to believe that he might not say it. And all this is important because now that AI can just take anyone's voice and make them say anything, we have to guard ourselves, right? Even if a bias might make us more likely to believe something or not. This one, I think we all know whether this is real or fake. I think. Had Donald Trump repeatedly praised Hannibal Lecter? Yes, he has. Um, yeah, I think he thinks that seeking asylum, migrants are seeking insane asylums. So he like his brain connects it to Hannibal Lecter. I don't know. I can't get into that guy's head, but I think that might be what he's thinking when he does that. And this one, has Biden ever said you're a lying dog faced pony shoulder to a student? No, a lot of no's, some yes. Why not? Hope not. A lot of hope nots. Need context. Need context. That's a good response there. Yes, he did say this, but it was in a semi-joking manner, to a student. But of course, basically someone was too young. He thought they were too young to caucus. Someone said that they had caucus before, and he said you're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. But it was like in jest, right? But the quote was taken without context, right? And how would we know if we can't check the source? Yes, these are good responses, right? Like asking for context. How do we know? Like you might not be able to say yes or no, right? You might say otherwise, but take some time. So those are some quotes. I'm gonna go through a couple more of some of these here, just some AI stuff, so we can get our discernment levels up. This one right here. Is this is this uh is this real or fake? Some real, some fake. So this one is fake because we know Christmas at Mar-a-Lago looks nothing like this. I don't know if Donald has spent this much time with this many amount of black people during the holiday season ever in his life. But also, yes, the hands. Now, the hands, this was a post that went viral on semi-viral on Facebook where basically claimed Black Lives Matter endorsed him, which is also unbelievable. But yes, you can see the fingers. AI is still really bad with hands. So there's that. But for time's sake, I'm gonna run through just a couple of videos for you very briefly. I might skip some, but I just want to just have you. I want you to look at how advanced this technology is becoming. This real or fake? There's going to be some real ones. There's going to be some fake ones. And play it again. We have a real. We have some fakes. We have some real. It's entirely made of AI. It's a full AI image, and the way you can tell, it's just the waves are too perfect. When it comes to AI stuff, you want to always look at the hands, and on videos, you want to look for unnatural movements. You see the the wave is entirely too perfect, strung all the way across. It's almost like it's just waves don't move in that much perfection. So that one is fake. And I'm just gonna go through. I think I'll skip this one just for time's sake. And we'll go to this one. Real or fake? Some reals. Pretty split. This one's more difficult. A lot of real. A lot of people say it's real. A lot of people say it's real. This one is fake. It's made entirely of AI. I know, unbelievable. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the technology, right? So there's a couple other ones, but for time's sake, want to get to some of them, the more constructive work. But yeah, I know, right? Oh my God, it's unbelievable. This is Sora AI. This is it's the next open AI's model after ChatGPT, a video model. It's not released to the public yet, but it essentially can create these hyper realistic videos. And the way you can get to the original source of these videos, if you were to see them in a while, you can reverse Google image search them. And you can also look for just unnatural movements. There's some stuff this guy does with his mouth that doesn't look real, the textures, and there are also some AI. Yes. I see we have someone in the chat who's talking about some tools that can provide AI watermarks. There's truthmedia.org. I think you can enter AI stuff into, and it can tell you whether it's real or fake. But this is what's coming, and pretty soon you're going to be able to put entire screenplays into a into a prompt, and then it'll generate an entire video. So yeah, just some really, really powerful technology coming our way. Okay, so any questions or thoughts so far? Just if anyone wants to throw something in the chat or has any thoughts. A bit nauseous. Yeah, it's concerning, right? It really is just it's really disconcerting, and yeah, it's scary. Um, but I will say, just for reassurance, when I did present some of these videos to fifth graders and middle schoolers, all of them pretty much were able to see what, like, and a lot of these young people have the tools internally somehow. So I have hope in like the future generations as well. But also, like, we need to teach media literacy ASAP and ingrain like AI literacy in there as well. But basically, and yes, Matthew, Congress could pass rules to control or mark fake images. We have Biden did a executive order on AI. It was more about transparency of the model, not really that much enforceable stuff. But if Congress were to somehow come to an agreement, we could get them to do some ethical AI regulations. We have the EU's AI Act that does a really great job of creating tools and enforceable frameworks that AI companies have to model. Like, for example, OpenAI doesn't let you do political stuff, right? They have their own internal regulation. We could maybe standardize that across industry at a legislative level. And Elon's Grok AI lets you create whatever you want. So there's basically, we need to bring everybody up to a certain standard. Um, yes, and exactly what we need is just more high quality journalists. And how do we know you're giving accurate answers? Like, it's difficult. It's difficult. And right now, what we have to do is lean on trusted news organizations, trusted journalists, trusted figures that we trust, and really just our own reasoning faculties at this point. So, just quickly, yes. So Jules is saying this helps her understand, like, we're being bombarded with this and helps them discern this divide that we're in. Basically, we've seen these disinformation tactics used. If we use the big lie as an example, they sometimes prey upon a kernel of truth or pre-existing distrust. Like, if you distrust the system or the government, you're more likely to believe, that the government is trying to steal an election from you, right? Or the the incumbent government or the Democrats, right? And they'll take a kernel of truth or some kind of internal suspicion. They'll repeat it over and over and over and over again. We saw this with the FEMA stuff, just absolute disinformation, but the repetition of it is what got it to stick. And the exploiting of trusted sources with the big lie, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, people who essentially go out their way to then exploit the trust of their viewers. And then the fake amplification with bots and stuff we see a lot on Musk's Twitter now, with the algorithm being basically totally twisted into a right-wing propaganda machine. And these are some of the tactics that are being used. And just a quick example before we get into, like, now, once we have this context, how do we have dialogue? The January 6th committee, I thought, was a fantastic example of a public anti-disinformation campaign that then took those tactics I just showed you and flipped them on its head. They then exposed the anatomy of the lie. They repeated it over and over and over again. You could Liz Cheney's voice is still in my head saying he lit the flame. They use the same phrases over and over again till it's stuck in your head. And at the time, we saw real impact on public opinion on belief in the big lie in 2022. And since then, since that committee's been shut down, we've seen the reverse of that with the lies being totally believed again. And of course, the use of trusted sources. They used Bill Barr. They used uh, Republican officials to deliver the message. And it's really one of these things where you have to use the trusted sources of your target audience. Is why Harris now leaning on some Republican endorsements is important. So we're gonna have in a few more slides after this, we're gonna talk through some real world examples, and I'm gonna hear from some of you as well. But basically, now that you have all this context, now that which I'm sure you've already had much of it, but now that we've kind of covered this disinformation age we find ourselves in, we're going to be encountering this in the real world, right? You're going to be encountering this at doors. And when I was out knocking doors, I encountered a lot of it myself. And the keys to this, especially if you're doing persuasion door knocking, if you're knocking on an independent door or Republican's door as a volunteer, you want to stay calm. It's rule number just one. It's hard sometimes, but just staying calm and guarding your own peace to make sure that things don't escalate. That's what you have to do at the ground level. And if someone opens a door and says something to you that's ridiculous, you want to analyze if it's a difference of opinion or if it's a piece of disinformation. And then you want to decide whether it's worth engaging. And we're going to go through some examples in a second, but if someone opens up the door and it's like, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, and just yelling at you, you might want to say, okay, have a nice day, and then walk away, right? You don't want to engage or try to talk to anyone who's trying to troll you or actively trigger you. But on the other hand, if someone says something where, it might just be a difference of opinion, or maybe they're just misled and they're saying something like, oh, well, the economy was better under Trump or something, right? Then that might be one where you ask more questions. That mean one where you find common ground. Say, oh, well, I relate to this, struggle you're having, and then have you heard about Harris's plan to do X? And that's a different approach you would take. And we're going to come back to that too in a second. But let's say that someone opens a door and it's a piece of misinformation or disinformation, like or even if it is something where they're just misled on the economy, or it's something where you think you can break through, where you actually have made the decision to engage. The key is to not just make them feel stupid, right? The key is to not just say you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, Donald's lying to you, right? You have to acknowledge the claim, be like, oh, that's interesting. You would say that. Maybe you say you might look into it yourself or something, right? And then you say, well, where'd you get that information? Have you thought about this? A lot of the times, probing questions are the things that get these people to then unravel it themselves. People often self-radicalize. In order to de-radicalize, they need to self-de-radicalize. So you need to ask probing questions. And then, for example, if it's FEMA, like I know I've heard examples of people running into FEMA misinfo at the door. You probably want to present alternative explanations, right? You might want to actually give something like, okay, well, hey, maybe FEMA isn't actually confiscating houses, um, or maybe they're actually doing the work. Or have you heard about? There's a great FEMA page you can go to that's provided by the government that you can give them a link to potentially. Like you can offer them alternative ways to come to new conclusions and then encourage them to maybe rethink it. And then maybe you don't have to come to an agreement at the door, but you can kind of leave them. But most of the time, if you run into really overt disinfo, you just want to disengage. And then here are just some broad, like before we get into our discussion here, our back and forth, just some broad like woo-saws to take with you to the door, right? Like you want to just try to have empathetic discussions. I had a conversation with this interesting conversation with a Black Trump supporter who opened his door in like America First her shirt and really just wanted to talk to me. And in that instance, you might be best to walk away, but you can always like try to be empathetic if someone comes in, they're really trying to engage with you as a voter, and you want to try to focus on your common values. If you agree on, you know, you might agree. They might wait till they say something you agree with and then find an in and say, oh, well, I actually agree with that point. We can come to an agreement there, and then, try to find ways to go around it, and then separate the ideas from the identity. Don't attack. They might try to attack you personally, but never try to attack the person, uh, attack the idea. And also avoiding partisan labels on ideas is important, because there's that famous polls, all those polls, right? Back when Obamacare was unpopular, when you polled it with the name Obamacare, it was like really, it was like in the negatives, right? But when you just hold the policy ideas, it was up, right? It was with the partisan label of Obama. And that's what we see all the time. Where you can start to ask people questions, when you're sent to doors and you're asked like an issue-based question, you're trying to ask them what issues they care about. You can broach, say, hey, have you heard about this policy proposal? Do you support that policy? And if they say yes, you can say afterwards, it's a Harris policy, by the way, right? So things like that. So those are just a couple, some things we can think through as we go through some of these scenarios here. But yeah, that's just the bulk of some of the stuff we want to go through. And then now what I want to do is talk to some of you about what you've experienced at the doors. And if you have any examples that you would like to share, that we can then work through and take it through some of these frameworks, right? Because if you've already been on trips, if you're planning to go on another trip, what are some real world examples that you've had? We could throw them into the chat. We'll start with you, Rebecca, with raising your hand. But then while you're doing that, other people, if you can throw it into the chat, and then we'll call you up to explain further. But go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, this is very specific to this door knocking, but I think it will help. I was campaigning for Derek Tran, who's first generation Vietnamese in a primarily Vietnamese neighborhood. And it's they've been told the Dems are communists. Most of these people were 50 and older, coming after the Vietnam War. So that was a very particular market, and I know that Kamala is not going to turn our country to communism, because we'd have to get rid of all our private property. But that's a very intellectual answer. I'm like, how do I speak to the emotional fear of our government becoming something, especially to people that maybe have fled another country, or just to Americans in general that don't understand the term communism or socialism?
Yeah,
Ahmed, you're on mute.
yeah. So I think really that's an interesting one, because basically what you can do in this instance is really talk through some of the hold on, give me a second. Some background noise there. I think one of the things you can do is really just talk through like the fact that, the Harris is not really trying to bring communism, obviously, but talk through some of these policies, right? Like try to focus on the things that she wants to do to help, right? And then take the labels off, right? Like take the labels off of the policies and say, these are the things that she wants to do. Do you think that this is communism? Like, exactly, right? Like Becky says, what's communistic policies are you concerned about? And if they can't really name any, then you can talk through the policies that she's actually proposing. I always like to bring it back to just the policies, right? When it comes to trying to label her as some kind of communist, or trying to essentially just worry about socialism coming, you can just say, hey, like at the end of the day, there are just certain policies that are just here to help everyday Americans, right? And sometimes these policies can be twisted to be seen as communism when they're just simply trying to help the middle class. And it's a tactic that's being used. And you can also explain the tactic to them as well.
Yeah.
Does that help at all? And also, if you want to,
Yeah, let me jump in on this. Maybe Ahmed, we can stop sharing screen, because I would love to see people if we're just doing scenarios.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So I have two things to say to that. One is specific to your specific circumstance, and then like one is a little bit more general. So I found for at least Asian American communities, or like first generation immigrants, specifically the Vietnamese like immigrants, because like my family's also one. It's really hard to go to policy. because to your point, Rebecca, maybe what you're dealing with is not so much like, I don't know about Harris, I don't care about policy, but more about like, it's the instinctual fear, right? Of like where they may go into. So in that situation, I find that it's easier to turn inward and just be like, well, I believe in voting for Kamala, or like, I believe in voting, period, because of XYZ. Like, I want to see this. So that's one. So like turning it on your personal reasons as to why you're there instead of further engaging in the misinformation debate, right? Which they may not be equipped to handle with you, actually. They may just know as far as she's a communist, period. I know nothing but on that sentence, you know? The other thing too is you can also ask them, why did they come to the US? You know, like what is it about being a citizen that appeals to them, you know? And because where we are right now in this crossroad of Trump and Harris is that we might not have a democracy or the ability to vote after Trump gets elected. So there are immigrants that come from countries without a democracy, and they are now currently in a country with democracy. So maybe drilling down to like, do you like the ability to vote? Is it something that's important to you? You know, like you gave a lot to become a citizen. That right might be taken away, regardless if you know that or not. So those are the two things that I would say there specifically for first generation immigrants. And that's a really hard misinformation, disinformation loop because it's also a language barrier. There are people out there doing this intentionally in that echo chamber that you as an English speaker will not be able to breach most of the time. And then something more general about all of this too. And I saw a lot of stuff going on in the chat about like, well, what about this, you know? And I just want you all to kind of remember that communication tree, right? Step one was staying calm. Step two was figuring out if you're being disinfo, like if this is a disconnection from a reality, right? And step three was figure out if you want to engage or disengage. So it's not so much how do I respond to each one of these specific instances of like people not following facts, you know? It's a matter of like, do I want to engage right now in whatever this rabbit hole is going to take me down? And if the answer is no, then you want to just wrap it up and go, right? Or you will get yourself locked into a conversation you don't want to be in. All right, Ahmed,
Yeah,
is there another
that's
example
well
you
said.
wanted to? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so there's also things you can do, you know, like broaching Trump, et cetera, on that example. But I think Ben really encapsulated it there. So any other ones? Anyone want to throw? Let me scroll back up through the chat here. So you had somebody say that, okay. Okay, Connie, go ahead. You're on mute still, Connie. Okay, well then okay, Connie, if you,
Sorry, I was having a hard
there we
time
go.
getting my mute button. I'm on
No
my
worries, no
phone.
worries. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So one thing I don't know my history all that well, and I can't get into fact wars, but I was just in California, and one of the things I would say when I knocked on a door, if someone presented me with all sorts of stuff, which they did, I said, I don't know about that, any of that. I said, but what I do know is this, and I just schooled myself in one thing, which was healthcare. Like Adam Gray, I really like it. I'm involved in healthcare. I really like what Adam Gray has done for healthcare. He's brought money to the schools for a nursing school, and he's done some really creative things around getting EMTs involved in the communities when we don't have doctors. And that kind of just planted a seed, And because I was finding that lots of people are really, really concerned with locally what mattered to them. So if you can figure out what's happening locally and just say, you're not wrong, but here's what I know, and I'm the expert in this. And it seemed like you could drop a seed in there a little bit. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, that's really a good point, a good route you could take where if you have a specific area of expertise or a specific thing you have drilled down that's important to that locality, pulling that out to divert from like let's say an insane rabbit hole is also a smart strategy. If they start just kind of going off about some topic, you're like, well, Well, the candidate's also really good on healthcare, or this other thing that is important in this community. So that's a good approach too.
Yeah, what I was finding is they were just going through all the talking points, Well, what about the immigration? They don't care about me. You know, Biden's done this X, Y, and Z. And it's like, I think you only have so much time, right? So, yeah, anyway.
Exactly. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Trina, we're gonna go to you, and then I'm gonna yeah, go ahead, Trina.
So I just want to say that we just came back from Atlanta and we had a lot of work in the suburbs, some of which was not very blue. It was bluer than we thought, but at some doors we were really working this. And there's nothing factual anybody found that made a dent in anybody's disinformation bubble. We didn't find that at all. What we found, and this is, a small group, this is just this small N study. But what really worked is to connect with the person. And somebody got into a whole thing about growing tomatoes because it was completely authentic. And she saw some tomatoes and she wanted to know, my God, how do you grow tomatoes like that? And then when you have a relationship with somebody, then you talk about, I'm out here because this means so much to me. That seemed to make a facial change, but no facts. You just get into a match, kind of a pissing match. And then Ben said something on a video, really good. She said, here you are. She said, I tried 3 times to connect. And if after 3 tries, I don't connect, I disengage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that could be rebuttal, that could be planting a seed, that could be, have you thought about this, right? But if you're just hitting wall, boom, boom, boom,
And
it's
then
not going anywhere.
the inquiry, tell me more about that. Like, how did you come to that?
Exactly.
Sorry, I saw all these texts. How did that hit you? How did that affect your life? How did you arrive at this?
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And I think that it's really about connecting on that personal level, because like I had an example where there was some kind of, we really weren't connecting at all, and then I saw his dog and I was like, oh, is that a Wheaton? Is that a Wheaton Terrier? And like, if you're a Wheaton Terrier owner, everyone thinks they're golden doodles, but like a very specific few will know that like that's a Wheaton. And he was like, yeah, it's a Wheaton. And then we talked about that, and then that was actually kind of an in. And then guard was let down, and then we're able to talk about issues. So like, I think finding ways to connect on non-related political stuff, that's what that common ground branch of the communication tree is all about, where it's finding common ground. It doesn't have to be on politics. It could be on, you might have the same sports team that you're a fan of, or you've got, similar interests in TV shows or something. If you hear, TV in the background, it's a show like, oh, I like that. And then just basically finding ways to meet them halfway on alternative topics as well. But then, of course, the more you hear people talk, you will find something politically to find common ground on.
Yeah.
And then you can find an in there, and then use that to broach a potential policy from Harris or the candidate that you're canvassing for. And
For
Ben, you
sure.
just
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I think Ahmed, you and Trina is connecting this really well to a lot of what I'm seeing in the chat about the economy, specifically the line about like affordability, right? Like it's a lived fact for people, like a lived reality that things cost a lot more than they used to a couple of years ago. Um, and a lot of people like that's a bottom line, literally like a bottom line for them, right? And like you're not going to be able to go down the fact route with people who feel like they're barely getting by on a paycheck and they thought their life 4 years earlier was better, and it just so happened to be under the Trump administration. So what we found worked is kind of like what Trina and Ahmed is talking about, is making a connection, is acknowledgement, right? Back to your slide earlier, is acknowledgement that like, yeah, I hear you, I feel you, things are much like harder for me too, we all live under this. So, but like, let's think about, things are continuing to be hard, who has the solution moving forward, right? And then like maybe that's like a good way to move into Harris policies, or like getting people to think about what's ahead of them instead of what's behind them. But if you engage with people in conflict, they're just going to get stuck in that. Ahmed?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, and really like acknowledging the claim, or like that I feel your pain thing, or like, yeah, I feel you that it's hard. And then explaining that path forward. And a lot of the time that nostalgia for the Trump era economy is just like, first off, erasing 2020 entirely. But essentially, it's Trump's policies moving forward is the story, right? It's like, well, that you may have been in a better situation there, but objectively moving forward, economists have shown that Harris's policies are significantly better. And just today we see what it's going to do with the tariffs and the mass deportations that will actually tank the economy. And you can ask them, hey, look into that. And they'll find literally unanimous opinion online from economists that tell them that his plans would tank the economy. So there's a lot of things you can do there, and without saying you're wrong, but like leading them down the right path. And Albert, I see you raising your hand here.
Yeah, two things. First of all, on the economy, we're getting into some meat now, which is helpful. Thinking about to what extent is talking about the past and trying to refute the memory do any good? Probably not a lot. Looking ahead is very consistent with what Kamala is, the way that she's trying to present her candidacy. So that does seem more practical to me. Just in terms of strategy when approaching, I think it's worthwhile to distinguish between somebody who is misinformed or disinformed and anchored in their views. I feel much more upbeat when I'm on a doorstep or on the phone, and somebody says to me, "I'm really uncertain. I don't know what to think. I have a vague memory that things were better under Trump," but they're not married to that idea. They're genuinely up in the air. And I think, to me, those people are more worth spending time with than somebody who is coming at me with a pro-Trump argument.
Oh,
I'd be
100%, Albert.
a lot.
Yeah.
Most of you people have probably done a lot more in-person canvassing than I, so I'd like to hear what people say.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on the nose. And and I'll also make a recommendation here for another 202 training that's recorded on our website. It's Conversations with Republican Voters. It's specifically about disengagement and engagement with Republican and independent voters. And we go into depth about so what is a productive conversation and what isn't, and how do you disengage when it's not a productive conversation. And Albert, you just gave a great summary of that. Like if people are more open, like if their body language is open, if they're open to mutual exchange, where they're listening as well as talking, and you're listening as well as talking. And it's not just like you standing there in front of somebody who's just barraging at you, right? So you're right, like at Common Power, we want to have productive conversations. We don't necessarily want to have as many conversations as possible, but we want to be able to discern where our time is best used. And that's going through, cycling through fast those unproductive conversations to get to those productive conversations where we can make the best impact. So yeah, you're right on that, Albert. And I'll just say personally, I feel like a good conversation is like boiling an egg. You don't want to overboil it. You don't want to leave it too soft. So you just want to do 5-6 minutes, right? Just to get it jammy. So that's kind of how I do it. All right.
Okay, great. So I'm looking through some others. We see a lot of economy in the chat, and also some abortion stuff here as well. John says, I'm a Christian and abortion is my bottom line. We couldn't find a way to get past that. When it comes to pro-lifers, I do tend to take it beyond abortion as well. Like you could say, look, we can all agree that there could be reasonable, reasonable restrictions of some kind, but then you say, who is actually looking out for the life of the entire life of the person? And I have found that modern pro-life, like the people who actually believe it, are actually down for social safety net. I don't know if maybe it's just anecdotal, but a couple conversations I've been in with some pro-lifers, the social safety net stuff actually, was like they were surprisingly down for the child tax credit, family funding, things like that did actually make an impact. And there's contrast you can paint there. And I think it might be hard with like a fundamentalist Christian, but even on that, I think there's some questions that you can ask that could potentially lead them somewhere. And then, yes, of course, like Lisa's saying here, obviously, yeah, the miscarriage risk, the fact that there's a new article that was released, I think it was yesterday, about the fact that we're seeing more infant mortality in the post-Roe world. Like we're actually seeing more life lost because of this. And I think that that's really, really important to hit with pro-life people, and they could be moved by it. So let's see, we've got
So while people are just kind of like dropping more oh yeah, go ahead, John.
gotcha.
My question is, I canvassed in September in North Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there's a lot of people who are just getting by. And I've read about NAFTA that, Reagan started and Clinton got through Congress that really took away a lot of the good paying jobs for non-college graduated people of color and ended up in Mexico. And there's still a lot of pain from that. How do we deal with that with people who are, who've experienced that or are indirectly relating to that? Because to some of those people, Trump looks like a new option, even though they don't have no idea what he's going to really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that front, you can always point to the manufacturing growth that's happened under Biden. If you're talking about what's happened with outsourcing, I think there's a union angle there too. There's just different things you can do about that, but the pro-labor side of like what has been done already, and the job progress, the progress on onshoring and preventing offshoring, the Chips and Science Act, where like the real manufacturing is going to be in the future, where we're setting up shop here to manufacture all these chips. And I think there's an angle there to just kind of like you can tout some Biden progress too. Like I know a lot of people like to try to be shy a little bit about how great a President Biden was objectively, in my opinion. But like I think we can talk about the progress that he's made and that Harris was a part of that. And that moving forward, it's always the moving forward, the tariffs. Like I just really think the end all be all on so many of these topics. And I know, John, you're talking more about like historical pain that they're feeling with NAFTA and these trade deals. But like if we're talking future trade, Trump wants to trigger like a universal trade war with the entire planet, essentially, with these blanket tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs. It's gonna tank the economy. It's gonna lead us into a recession, just objectively. And I feel like that really, I think the reason why Harris has made so much momentum on the issue of the economy is because more people are learning about Trump's actual plans.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
So-
helps a lot. It was kind of long-winded, but go ahead, Ben.
No, yeah, that's absolutely right. I feel like the more that like it's really interesting. I've been to a lot of 202 training because like I have to. And like as like I'm hearing these concepts over and over again and knocking on doors over and over again, you kind of get a sense of this. I want to try to break it down here a little bit. You can tell real quickly when you're at a difficult door, two ways it can go. One, if someone is responding well to information or if they're responding well to emotion, right? So if like someone is going to respond well to information, exactly right, Ahmed. You're like the tariffs, like think about like the CHIPS Act, think about all the manufacturing that's returning into. Just do a Google search on some of this stuff and you'll find more, right? And then people will be like, oh, I didn't know about that. Or like, I didn't realize that money came from that decision to like, my local hospital or whatever, that kind of thing. So you can feel people physically changing their body language or their tone in engaging with you when you introduce an idea and they're responding well to information. If they are not responding well to information, even like that, a casual line, an attempt at connection or planting a seed, and they're still raw with that emotion, and some of these topics are really deep in people's hearts. Like if their family lost jobs and they're still feeling the after effects of that. If, if they're really caught up in the Palestine and Israel situation, we've seen that at doors too. If they've just been hit by a hurricane a week ago, And so there's a point here where we stop becoming informatives and canvassers and we start becoming human beings at doors with people. And we respond to them by saying, hey, yeah, I totally respect that. I'm gonna do some research, maybe you can too. But you know, our vote is all right, and I respect the choice that you're going to make. I just hope that when you go into the ballot box or fill out your ballot, you consider a little bit of what we talked about here today. And then you just gracefully let it go. Because unless you yourself feel that you're equipped and trained to handle emotions, real raw emotions from people right now, you got to save some of that yourself, right? So kind of like distinguish within the first 30 seconds, is this going to be an information driven voter or an emotional driven voter? Go ahead, Trina.
Just that on some of the states, they will give you the voting history on the person. And if it says SR solid Republican, you'll walk in there knowing that this person is really grounded in that culture and there's less of a chance rather than likely Republican.
Yeah, exactly. Ahmed?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just trying to, there's just so much. You guys have been, this has been so active discussion here in the chat. And, you know, I see someone, when I scroll back further, I see Palestine. And I think one of the key things that has worked when I found people who are, you know, aren't just, if you're not just like an avowed leftist that just wants to vote for Stein, if you actually want to solve the issue, I've found that the AOC line of like, what conditions you want to organize under really resonates with people, because it's like, okay, you know, obviously Trump won't be better on this. Like there's that line, which for them, for people who are really passionate about it, that better isn't. But I also explaining there a lot of times they think, oh, why hasn't Harris explicitly outlined an alternative approach to Biden? She's still in the Biden administration. She's the vice president. She can't openly undermine their negotiations. And also, if you were to, who would you want to be trying to pressure to do the right thing in the future? If it's Trump, do you think he'll listen to you? Number one. And if it's Trump, do you think he's going to take any different approach than he did to the Middle East when he was president, which was just letting civilian casualties fly? So there's that angle as well. But I was just pulling that from the chat. Albert, you had your hand raised. So
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't even muted. This is relevant. I found sometimes when if I'm at the door or on the phone with a fact-focused voter who seems to be receptive to information, I can sometimes get my ducks in a row by going to ChatGPT and asking a focused question and seeing what it turns out. Sometimes it's kind of generic and unpersuasive, but sometimes it gives me a pithy summary of what the arguments are on actually both sides of an issue. And it can help you get your thoughts assembled if you know on some specific issue, such as the economy or Gaza, if you will. Just if people haven't played around with AI at all, ChatGPT is really easy. You just type words into a field and you ask your question the way you would ask a knowledgeable expert, and you see what comes out. It can be helpful.
yeah, and obviously that's a positive use of AI. I know I just went through a totally dystopian reality where it's just being used for terrible purposes, but there are good uses for it, and there are good ways to bounce that stuff off as well. You bounce different scenarios off, and then they really help. And it really is about, like what Ben said, you know, analyzing the specific voter. If it seems like they're going to be moved by an emotional plea, or someone that's going to be more fact-based or logic-based with their approach, you can then make a determination there. And I see a bunch of, I've seen this a couple times, I think, what Becky's saying here, people hesitant to vote for a woman, and they don't even recognize that.
So we don't address it. That's the thing. We don't. There's a lot of things that we don't address in the field because we don't live there. We're not their neighbor, and we're certainly not their family members, right? There's a lot of deep cultural reasons and a lot of internalized reasons why someone make a political decision. You have everything in your life and it distills to two choices. Like imagine that, right? So as canvassers at doors, a lot of it is just like, well, I'm not going to get anywhere with that. So I'm just going to say goodbye and go. Thank you for your time and have a good day. We're not there to be deep canvassing people like this. So just for context, deep canvassing is when you make contact with the same group of people again and again and again. It takes years. And it's usually done by people that they respect in their community to change people's minds or to sway people's hearts. And that's not our jobs, unfortunately. Our job is to give information, make sure people get to the polls, and if we can, move the needle, right, on certain voters. We are not there to help people untangle their internalized misogyny or racism, or to figure out, argue with them about their religion and what that shows up in politics. There are a lot of things that we don't engage in at the doors, actually. And some of the really hard lessons that we've learned as an organization is to disengage. So think a little bit about that as you're heading out there today. There are a lot of voters that we need to get to who forgot elections on Tuesday, who forgot where the polling location is, who didn't know that they had to bring a voting ID to vote, who forgot to register in time, and forgot to mail in their ballots. We need to get to those conversations. We can't spend 45 minutes with someone figuring out why they're not voting for a Black woman.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to note that, although we're talking about the specific ways to handle different conversations, but a lot of the time, frankly, sometimes most of the time, you're going to want to just move on to the next door. You might just want to say, hey, thank you, have a nice day. See you. And you want to analyze that based off of whether or not you think that it's worth your time. And I'm seeing the last two in there, right, or not worth, if someone is saying racism, basically racist dog whistles, that is a see you later. That is a all right, hello. Okay, great. Have a good day. Take it easy, or have a terrible day. And then take it easy and then walk away. And you let that be. And it's hard to disengage, especially with violent people. I had a run-in where I literally had to stand there with the person I was with, and we had to basically de-escalate the guy because he was seemingly violent at first, and then we literally had to just be calm and get into an I feel your pain moment. And the guy started crying eventually. He was a veteran, but initially he was like violent, but that was a unique circumstance where we had to de-escalate him. But in most
Yeah.
cases, you disengage and you walk away
Yeah, and
if you
I'll
feel
just
threatened
say
at a door.
exactly. So let me just say this too about violence at doors. We have never been physically harmed while canvassing at a door, right? There have been signs of risks, dogs off their leash, gun owners just like, open carry in some of these states, and a bunch of other things that you might find when you willingly go into someone's property and knock on their door, right? So, but we've never had an incident where we've been physically harmed. And a lot of our training, if you look on, especially the 103, travel with CP, your trip orientations for your trips, a lot of the 202 trainings, we break down some of these risks and the feeling of safety, so signs of risk versus how comfortable you are in these neighborhoods. So I would recommend those trainings as well. CP Future, I saw you had a hand. I just don't know which one of you is here.
Actually,
is
this
that?
is Larcy. This is Larcy.
Darcy!
I was about to say it's
Hi.
either Larcy or Kyra.
All good. Well, what I wanted to just say to some of the sentiments here is, I really appreciate people's willingness and openness to engage. Because a lot of times when we're meeting these people at the door, they will remind us of people we know in our own personal lives, right? If I go to my turf and I see somebody who happens to have an Asian name, or I recognize a Filipino name, and it is somebody that could look like somebody I know in my life, and they are not at all voting in the way that I hope they would vote. We want, there's a familiarity there that we want to make sure we're bringing back with us. And so those are one of those things where we also have to check our own kind of missions for that moment, right? Because you could open the door and it could look like somebody and they're and you're also reminded by certain conversations you're having in your own personal life. And just like we're saying here, 10 minutes worth of a conversation for one person could also mean 2 minutes with 5 different people. So as much as we want to be the ones to push them through the finish line, sometimes the best thing we can do is just get them closer to the finish line.
Exactly.
Yep. I mean, the way I see it, we're the mailmen of our country are the real heroes, okay? We go and we knock on doors, but these mailmen have to do it every day. So they face dogs, they face the same voters and the same risk we do, just every day. So when I think about that, I'm like, I can knock on the next door. The mailman comes here every day. you know? So, a little bit about, like, I think we should maybe start wrapping up if there are no more questions, Ahmed.
Yeah, yeah. Unless there are any if there's any final thoughts or anything that anyone wants to contribute or any questions before we start to wind it down, feel free. But I think we've really covered a lot here, and I think it's really the key takeaway. Although we talked about a lot of strategies in order to handle disinfo or handle opinion, is the key decision is whether or not to engage or disengage. And I think if you think you have a pathway to convincing someone, you engage. And if you think if someone's rambling about the Illuminati, or I had someone tell me about the CIA killed JFK and they tried to kill Trump, you say, okay, great to meet you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't stay on your laptop too long. Do more research, but you just say bye. And I think that's the key.
Beautiful. Okay, so we'll send out a follow-up email later tonight or tomorrow, very likely tomorrow, with a recording of this that you can send to other people in your lives if this is helpful for you to reference later. And maybe, Ahmed, you can just take out that communication tree or some of the select slides that people can just have as a separate PDF. I think that would be helpful as well, maybe. Okay, you're on mute, but I think I'm reading your lips and said yes for sure.
Yeah, I was saying, yeah, that's exactly what I said. Yes, for sure. I'll send those over.
Okay. Beautiful. I'm gonna stop recording.